You can say everybody's job is stressful, but pastors' jobs are more stressful. 1 minute they are at just heart-wrenching, stressful situations that are helping people walk through. And the next minute they're making a decision on how many widgets do we buy. Then you've got your personal family stuff and all of that. It just goes from one to the next to the next. It's up, down, and you weren't created for that. We've got all this stress and we're isolated and we're lonely. And we don't know what to do with it. A lot of us are carrying heavy loads and heavy burdens that maybe Jesus didn't give us, but we're carrying them. We need to prioritize the mental health of pastors. I believe that very, very strongly.
Over 3,000 pastors quit full-time ministry every year. 38% of pastors have seriously considered stepping down from full-time ministry. There's the megachurch pastors or celebrity pastors. They have scandals or they fall. I feel like we're seeing that more and more.
Yeah.
Why do you think that might be? Welcome back to the Church Candy Podcast. Today I'm sitting down with church planting legend, Pastor Greg Surratt. You know him from Seacoast Church and one of the co-founders of ARC. Pastor Greg, how are you doing today, man?
Great to be here. Honored to sit down and talk to you a little bit.
Yeah, man, for sure. We're here in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. And, you know, you guys planted Seacoast back in the 80s. So what was it like planting a church back in 1998 or 1988? 1988.
Yeah, 88.
I was
before
born.
You were born.
I was born in 98. 10 years before I was born.
Yeah, before you were born. Yeah. You know, it was different. People always ask me, or a lot of times a church planner will say, you know, give me some tips. How'd you do this? How'd you do that? I said, listen, it was a different world. There were telephones connected to the wall. You didn't have them in your pocket. While I think issues that people have, you know, spiritually and physically and all of that are similar, some of the tactics that we used are no doubt, you know, ancient. And I know that your company helps people these days do it. And there wasn't that back then. There wasn't. Church planting probably wasn't as attractive, sexy, whatever, back in the 80s. And so we kind of had to make it up as we went.
Yeah. And so with that, Seacoast is huge now. How many campuses do you guys have?
We have 14.
14 campuses. What did the growth look like over the years? But really quick, before we jump into that, pastors, I'm going to ask you a question. Can your church handle more new guests? If that answer is yes, then I want to tell you about Church Candy. See, at Church Candy, we help churches get more new guests on Sundays by running their Facebook and Instagram ads, inviting their city to church. We are on a mission to connect 1 million people to a local church, and so far, we have already connected over 250,000 people to churches all across the country, and we would love to send people to your church as well. Imagine all the people that drive by your church every single day that want to grow in their relationship with the Lord, that want to be plugged into a life-giving church community, but they have no idea that your church exists. We want to get them connected to your ministry. So go to churchcandy.com or hit the link below in the description. I'll also pin it in the very first comment so you can schedule a call with the Church Candy team, learn more, and see if we would be a good fit to work together. Now, back to the podcast.
Oh, man. We first Sunday, we worked very, very hard to have a large launch. They didn't call it that back then, but I kind of intuitively knew that, you know, the larger the launch, the better chance that we had for continued, you know, success in what we wanted to do. And so we did a lot of marketing. We called 16,000 homes. They used to have telephone books back in the day where everybody's phone number was in a book. And so we just tore up the book, all the homes that were in the area that we were targeting, about 16,000 at that time. And we divided it up between, I think I had probably 6 or 8 volunteers per night, paid a few people, and we called homes every night at dinner.
So you're literally just like cold calling people?
Cold call at dinner time, and which is the worst possible thing. but that's when everybody was home because we used to eat together back in the day, and you'd answer your phone, and we asked, do you attend church? And if they said yes, we do. We said, great. Sorry to interrupt your dinner. Everybody dinner. If they said no, we don't, that we asked them, why do you think people don't attend church? And there happened to be two major scandals going on in the church world at the time with two of the largest ministries, and kind of a lot of people knew about them, and some of them were fairly close to where we are here in Charleston. And so people that didn't attend church had a lot to say about that. And so we said, listen, if we were to create a new church that addressed some of the issues, would you be interested in coming? And a certain percentage said yes. And so we had 340 people, I think, our first week, which was a movie theater, which in the day was huge. It really was. And my mistake was I thought, okay, well, this is going to be awesome. I called my best friend back in Colorado where I grew up, had a great job in our home church. And I said, man, you gotta quit your job, come out here. I need help. Revival's going on. We had 340 people. I grew up in a small church. Only time I had ever seen 340 people in a church I grew up in was, we never did. 300 was the most at Easter, so we have revival, and, we'll have 500 and 1,000 and who knows. And so he quit his job and came, and nobody told me that you wouldn't have as many people the second week as the first week. We teach them.
They didn't have the stats on, like, all right, expect a 50% drop off.
50% drop off, all of that. We didn't have any of that. And so we had a revival. We had a Gideon revival. We had less people every week than we had the week before. And that continued for 3 years. In fact, our first 3 years, every year at the end of the year, our report was less people than the year before. And so that's the kind of growth we had. In fact, we did not approach the opening number until year 5. And so we call Seacoast the slowest growing megachurch in America. And so that's kind of how the growth went in the early years.
Those first few years, was it pretty discouraging?
Oh, very discouraging. I tried to quit several times, and we had a lot of things that went on personally as a family. We had we had an automobile accident that was devastating. We had a jet ski accident that nearly killed my daughter. My mother died of cancer during that time. And then you had, the church basically not doing what I thought it would, and so it was hugely discouraging. I tried to quit several times. The elders of the launching church said, you can't quit. You launched it, you got to stay. And so we did.
Was church planting back then as popular as I feel like it is now?
Or people not at all. Not at all. Yeah, I had several people, even within my own family, that said, you're crazy. That's not how you do it. You find a church that's already existing, and then you become a pastor and do it that way. Kind of the backstory of why I did what I did. Before I went into, quote, full-time vocational ministry, I worked for Hewlett Packard Company in Fort Collins, or actually Loveland, Colorado at the time. And I had a friend who was far from God. I mean, they'd grown up Catholic, but he hadn't been to church in years, and from New York, I think, and working with me at Hewlett Packard. And we became friends, and they got pregnant, and they had a baby, and the baby was born with some challenges and died, I don't know, within a couple of months. And it was devastating for them. We kind of walked through it with them. And shortly after that, I got a part-time job. Maybe it was full-time at that point. Maybe I wasn't working for Hewlett Packard then. I don't remember, but with a small church in my denomination there in town. And I was basically a full-time construction worker, part-time youth pastor, part-time worship leader, and phone answerer. Okay. And I was the first staff member they ever had. And so while we were constructing a building, my friend came to walk through it. He saw the baptistry. He and his wife saw the baptistry. They're greeting their baby, and it brings up a lot of things for them. They said, "What's this? What's this swimming pool inside of the building?" I said, "Well, I explained what a baptistry was," and they said. Then they began to talk about their baby, and one of the things is that their baby was never baptized, and they were just devastated by that. And so I began to, really get deeper into what the gospel means. And over a short period of time, they had a desire to learn more. And so they asked, "Can we come to your church?" And I thought, "Oh God, no. we're not set up for people like you. We really weren't. It was a great little church and all of that, but we would talk about reaching the nations, but we had no clue about reaching our neighbors. We just weren't ready for that. We weren't set up for that." And so it was in those moments that really I said, if I ever am a part of designing a church or creating a church, I didn't even know what church planting, that wasn't a word. But I want to make a church that thinks about my friend. And that was the impetus for Seacoast. That just burned in me and burned in me and burned in me. And we wanted to have a church that would be aware of our friends outside. I'm not afraid at all of, I know there's arguments today about seeker sensitive, non-seeker sensitive. I don't apologize an ounce for that. There's this false dichotomy that you've got to water down the gospel in order to care about people outside of the church. Well, that's false. It's not an either or, it's a both and. We've never watered down anything. But we are aware all of the time that we have friends that are lost. And what can we do to reach our friends that are lost? And how can we be hospitable to them when they come in and are part of what we do? So that's probably more than you wanted to hear, but that was the motivation. There wasn't a lot of there wasn't a lot of emphasis on church planting back then.
So as you guys grew over the years, what led from going from one campus to that first additional campus when you started multi-site?
Yeah. We grew. We began to have multiple services, first 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then 5. And maybe went to 6. I don't remember, but at least 5. And we needed a bigger building. And so we're in the South, right? I mean, this is the Bible Belt. This actually, Charleston isn't. You're in Charleston today. It's a more cosmopolitan city, from all over the world. But so it's a little different. But I didn't think about that. And we went to this town to get permission to build a bigger building. We bought land all around us. And in that process, we landed in the middle of a political, not in my backyard fight that wasn't really about us, but we became the focus of it.
And what year was this?
That would have been right around 2000, something like that. And we became the focus of a fight that we didn't choose. We didn't want to. And ultimately, in a year process, the town said we couldn't build a bigger building, actually zoned our land to where it would not be possible to do that. And now that was all reversed a few years later. But at that time, what do you do? I like to say that innovation is just desperation in a pretty package. We were desperate. We didn't know what to do. And so we had to figure out, how do you have church in more than one location? Now, it seems crazy today, but the rules were then, here's where your location is. This is your address. This is where you do ministry. And so we had to think outside the box, and that's kind of where multi-site came from for us.
Was there any other churches that you knew of that were doing multi-site like that?
It's interesting that you ask. A group called Leadership Network, which was very influential in helping us along the way in several areas when we felt stuck, we would get together with some other churches. And they put out a call that said, if there are any churches that are already or thinking about doing church in more than one location. Let's get together and figure this out. And so we answered the call, and the first meeting was September 11th, 2001, and in Chicago. And oh my goodness, was that crazy? There's a lot of stories around that. But anyway, about 10 churches, 10 or 12, I think, it may have been 8, I don't know. But churches that you know now, that like Life Church, Oklahoma City, nobody knew who Life Church was. I mean, they had, I think they had one place they were doing church other than their original campus. We weren't doing it, but we were thinking about it. And anyway, there were Community Christian, Willow Creek Church. There were 6 or 8 or 10 churches that we made a commitment. What we're going to do is we are going to meet together every 6 months for about 4 days, and we're going to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the American version of multi-site grew out of.
So back then, did the technology even exist to be able to do like live stream video, or like logistically, how did that work? Was there slide preaching or
what?
We
did it in all kinds of ways. Life Church, I think, was one of the first ones that they bounced it off a satellite, and it was quite an event. Seacoast, on the other hand, we were at the other end of the technology. We were cheap, and we wanted to do it inexpensively. So we wanted to do movie theaters, and originally that was our goal. And we would record a Saturday night service, and then we would distribute that to wherever our campuses happened to be. And as it grew, and campuses got outside of the Charleston area, we would actually put a VCR videotape on a Greyhound bus, which there are all kind of problems with that whole concept. And we would deliver it to, at that point it was in Savannah, in Columbia, maybe Greenville at the time. And the pastors would get it in the middle of the night, and that would be how we would do. So that was our technology, was a video tape. And interestingly enough, for the first several years, I'm going to say 8 years, 9 years, something like that, we did a version of that. In other words, it was 1 week. Once we got away from this Saturday night's going to kill us, because of the potential disaster that can happen. So we went to 1 week delay, where we would do the best of whatever the weekend service was at the original campus, broadcast campus. And then every campus besides that got it on a 1 week delay. And we grew from 2,000 people to 10,000 people on a 1 week delay, even when a campus was 15, 20 minutes away. And we would have people that missed last week that would go to that campus and then come to this campus.
Like, wait, I just saw this last week.
Yeah. Well, or they were on vacation and they wanted to catch last week's message because we didn't have, I don't know.
Yeah, you can go on the YouTube archive.
It wasn't.
Or listen to the podcast.
I don't know if there was YouTube then. And so anyway, yeah. And the only reason we went to higher technology live was the what do you want to call it? The insanity of the lead pastor, who was me, who felt like we got to be live. Well, we've grown by not being live, but we have to be live. And so we figured out. And by then there was technology available that was more consistent and able to do it.
So whenever you guys were sending a VHS tape on a Greyhound bus and trying to get the message from the Saturday night service to one of your campuses, did you have any like horror stories, or like, oh my goodness, like they weren't able to get the message, and so the campus pastor had to shoot from the hip and preach a message?
Yeah, what you do is you create contingencies after you mess up. Okay, and so one of the first contingencies we created was a service in a box. In other words, we had a message that we had done. We had campus pastors that spoke, we do that too, but we would have a service in a box where, in case this didn't work, here's what you do. And it wasn't just the Greyhound bus, but it was the early technology that you're liable. I mean, one week, the very first week that we did service in a location, this was a DVD. My brother apparently who was in charge of all of that, had apparently put his thumbprint on the DVD. And so halfway through the message, I'm preaching and it freezes and my lips freeze over here and my face is right here. And doing this, And so they had to stop it. And the campus pastor got up, finished the message, and gave an altar call, and people got saved. But from those, we developed, backup plans, contingency.
Break glass in case of emergency.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, today your son Josh is the lead pastor of Seacoast. Was that always the plan for him to become your successor?
Oh, no, not at all. In fact, when we shoulder tapped him and said, "We think you're the guy," he said a version of, "What are you thinking? This could really mess up this church." Um, we had an executive team that began to talk to me about succession planning. It was interesting. Some of our executive team, they were world class, and one of them was the retired CEO of Fisher-Price Toys, and he landed in Charleston and became. In fact, he helped to create and design the management system that multi-sites use, a matrix system that probably still most of them do, because I didn't know how to spell the word scale, and he did it in his sleep, and he was on our management team, and him and a couple of other guys were prodding me in my 50s to think about succession. They thought about that in the business world, but in the church, you just preach till you die, and it's good either way. God uses it. But so we began to talk about it, and kind of a long process. And ultimately, they decided that Josh had the gifting, the passion for God, the things that were necessary. In fact, they saw a lot more in Josh probably than Josh saw in himself.
Yeah.
At that particular time.
What was Josh doing whenever it came to like being involved in ministry beforehand?
I think he started somewhere in the food chain, and by that point, he may have been a campus pastor. I can't remember what role he was playing at the time, but I do remember him saying that if the role involves preaching, teaching 70% of the time, he said, "I'm out. I got to tap out. I can't do that. But if you can trust me to develop a teaching team," which we'd already started to do, a true teaching team, and that I can lead in, he said, I may be able to do that. And so out of that, Seacoast looks very different than it did when I led. They have a teaching team that we have. I'm still a part of the church, but that of, I think, 6 people, and nobody teaches more than once a month, even Josh. And so you've got a different teacher, not necessarily every 6 weeks, but at least 5 of the 6 weeks, you're going to have a different teacher. And that's how it's flourished and grown, and he's developed it. It's an incredible model for sustainability.
Explain the teaching team model.
Yeah, what we do is we have, like I said, 6 people that are really regular parts of the teaching team, and then we've got others that are occasional part of that. And then every ministry, like the student ministry and young adult ministry and others, have teaching teams also. So you've got kind of a bullpen being developed.
Yeah.
And every Thursday is given to kind of developing all of that. And you'll have one meeting on a Thursday where whoever's going to be teaching in a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, we get together, we do series planning so we know where we're going. We know what the individual weeks are going to be, what the subject matter is, the text is going to be. And then they'll come in and they'll say, "Here's what I'm thinking about doing. Here's some ideas. Can you help me? What's some illustrations, or maybe what am I missing?" So the whole team works together on that. That person goes away and works on it. And then for the second hour on Thursday, whoever's teaching that particular weekend does it live in a 2,600 seat auditorium, 2,550, something like that, with maybe 5 to 8 people, maybe 10 in the building. So it's just torture. But they preach, they teach it. It's not just walk through it; it's a run through. It's like you teach what you're going to do, and then they're at the end of it. Then we give feedback. So there's a continuous feedback loop and a lot of help and all of that kind of thing. And so yeah, it's developed, I think, some pretty incredible speakers. I'm still involved in that part. I speak every 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. But I'm involved weekly in helping train communicators.
And so with that, did you guys get any kind of pushback or anything? I would imagine a lot of people, for years, it was probably you preaching majority of the Sundays.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people's expectation would have been, all right, Pastor Josh is going to come in and he's going to start preaching.
Yeah.
What was the reaction like to that?
Yeah, it was interesting. Number one, we didn't make a big announcement. We just don't do that. I assume that according to sociology, that about 65% of the people on the planet or in America are predisposed not to like change. I kind of like the way it's going. Pastors miss this when they lay out new vision. I think the beginning of new vision is to explain to people why we need to do something different. Because most people are like, hey, that sounds great, but I'm real good with where I'm at. So rather than, getting up every week, we're changing this, we don't ever change. We don't announce change. If there's a major deal, we might, say something about it. We just kind of do what we think God's leading us to do and see what happens. And so I didn't lay out a big strategy for we're going to go to, 6 speakers and next generation and all that. We started doing it. And at first people would go, well, these young guys, I don't know, we sure like you, and we wish you would preach more. And then it progressed to, hey, you better be careful. Some of these young guys are going to get your job, as if that wasn't the goal. And now I can be talking to somebody in the foyer and they'll tell me, Joel Delph or Josh Surratt or whoever is my favorite. And I'm like, you're talking to me, I'm the OG. I've been here forever. But it's progressed to where it's, it's not an issue anymore. And people have their favorites. And I think that's okay. It's not favorites like I am of Apollos or I'm of Paul or whatever. It's not that. It's that, different people have different teaching styles. Some are preachers, some are teachers, some are prophetic, some are encouraging, and different people, I think it's great for the whole body that they get a broader sense of God's word. So,
What advice would you give to pastors that want to build a teaching or preaching team?
yeah, look around, and I have a phrase that kind of I've used for several years. What is a burden for me is a blessing for someone else. Okay, so there are things that you do. As pastors, we tend to think we have to do it all. It all depends on us. Well, fewer things depend on you than what you think. And in the whole teaching area, what's a burden for you is probably going to be a blessing for somebody else. There may be people who are gifted by God to teach. Now, not everybody that says they are. I mean, lots of folks say, I have a gift to teach. And my question is, does anybody have a gift to listen to you? Okay. It's just real practical. And, but you've got to find that there are people and give them opportunities, in student ministry or children's ministry or, to do the open and close of a service and coach them and teach them. One of the primary values that we have at Seacoast it's probably not written anywhere, but it is a strong value, is that in order to thrive in our culture, you've got to crave coaching, okay? Not just put up with coaching, but crave coaching. I'm either good or obnoxious with immediate feedback. If you're singing a song, I'll text you while you're singing it and say what I think about, whatever the selection and all of that. And but they know that there's a relationship developed. They know I love them, and same with the teaching. And so crave coaching. And so we've got to be willing to. I think in order to make progress, you've got to have accurate feedback. And so create some kind of a feedback loop. We even have, um, I, I hate to call them critique sheets. I don't know what they are. I don't know what we call them, but uh, uh, for our speakers, and we've got a guy in our church that's a volunteer that has uh, uh, coached TED Talk teachers and done all kind of things. But he's put together a sheet that says, what was the scripture used? How consistent was it to the scripture? How many illustrations did you give? How many stories were told? How much audience engagement was there? Just all kinds of real, there usually as a pastor in a church, there's nobody giving you feedback. How was the message? Oh, that's great today, pastor. Well, what was good about it? What, and so we've kind of defined that a little bit. So I would do something like that. Find some people that may have a gift in embryo stage, and let's develop it a little bit. So long answer, but
No, that's great. That's great. This is something I'm going to give. I'm sitting back at home to my pastor because I'm on our preaching team. So with you transitioning to more of that founding pastor role, what's that season been like for you?
it's been great. It was interesting. We had Easter services, a few weeks ago, and just it's like most churches in America, the crowds are just unreal, amounts of people. And one of my granddaughters, I have 14 grandkids, and one of my granddaughters said to me, "Papa, what's it like not to preach at Easter at Seacoast?" She was kind of feeling sorry for me, And I had a church planner ask me that not too long ago. Said, What's it like not to be the man anymore?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm still a man, and the man in Debbie's eyes or mine, but that's not my assignment anymore." Okay, and I'm good with that. I have a whole teaching on that, but I think it's important that we understand that our assignments are given by God. I didn't create it, and He uses me how He wants to, and my role is to be grateful for whatever assignment that I have. And so my answer to my granddaughter was, I like it. I like my new role. I like my new assignment. And part of it is cheering on the next generation at Seacoast, and part of it is a more hands-on with pastors. And I love doing that.
In America, there are 23% of pastors are over the age of 65. What advice would you give to them whenever it comes to transitioning leadership to a successor?
Yeah. And I would give this advice to anybody is we need to understand that, as I just talked about assignment, that our identity is not our assignment. And that gets mixed up real easily, especially in pastors. And so when my identity is mixed up in my assignment, what do I do? Who am I? How can I give this up? What do I do? What am I going to do next? And some of those are valid questions that we need to address. What am I going to do next? How am I going to make a living for my family is an issue. Just a lot of questions, but our identity can't be wrapped up in that. And so I would say, clarify what your identity is. My identity is I am a beloved, chosen child of God. I have to remind myself of that every day. I sent myself a text this morning. If you have an iPhone, you can do that. It's called a reminder. And it says, this is going to be a wonderful day because I have a Father who loves me and has a wonderful plan for my life. And His plan for my life didn't stop when I turned a certain age, when I was no longer the lead pastor and now I'm a founding pastor. God has assignments. And so I would say, trust God in that. Begin to, as long, I believe at Seacoast, as long as I will make myself useful in cheering on the next generation from the front row or the back row or wherever I happen to be, there'll probably be a room for me. But if I insist on being the guy, you know, on the platform, that type of thing, my usefulness may very well wear out. And yeah. And I would also say, let's find God's next assignment for us, because there is a next. I believe there is. I believe there is for all of us. So that's just kind of some broad things, but that's some things to think about.
So you're one of the co-founders of ARC, the association of related churches, one of the largest church planting networks in America. Tell the story of how ARC got started.
We at Seacoast, we would have a small group leaders conference just for our leaders every year. And so one year, the pastor that was the head of that said, "Who do you think we ought to have come speak?" I said, "Well, I heard this guy in Louisiana at a cell church network. His name was Billy Hornsby. And why don't you call him, see if he'll come?" And so Billy agreed to come. And he usually, what he would do when he would do that is he would come on, do a Friday night, Saturday morning, and then stay for the weekend, preach at the church. And so after it was over on Saturday, he asked me about Sunday morning, and I said, "Oh, no, you're not preaching." I said, "I don't know you, and we do ministry out of relationship." And I think he kind of upset him a little bit, but he already has plane tickets, so he thought he'd stay. And so he stayed, and he was enamored with kind of how we did things. He hadn't seen it quite like that before. And so he came back a couple of weeks later on his own dime, brought his wife, and we were playing golf. And it was almost like an interview during golf, and I didn't understand what was going on. But at one point in our time together, he said, "What's the dream in your heart?" Which was classic Billy Hornsby. What is the dream in your heart? He asked thousands of young pastors that over his lifetime. And I said, "Well, if you really want to know, I want to plant 2,000 churches in my lifetime." And he said, "Great, how you doing on that?" And I said, "Well, we're 0 for 3. We planted 3 and we closed them down." And he said, "Well, you have a model." He said, "Your model is just very attractive. I think it would work." He said, you just don't know how to create organizations like that." And I said, "You're right." And he said, "Well, I do, and I'd love to work together." And so we began to dream about what it would be like to create an organization that would resource young pastors, because we'd studied a little bit in the business realm at the time, and I think the number was 95% of startups failed at the time, and a lot of it was under resourcing, in various areas. And we said, well, what if we were able to resource pastors with funding and maybe with training? Although our training was very primitive at the time. What if we were able to do something like that? And so his son-in-law, Chris Hodges, was on staff at the church in Baton Rouge, Bethany World Prayer Center, and a great church. And Rick Bezet, who was Chris's best friend, both of them wanted to plant a church. And so Billy convened a meeting in Louisiana with his brother and Billy and Chris and Rick and Dino Rizzo, who I'd never met, and myself, Billy. And we just dreamed about what would be possible. And we all made a commitment. We're going to do it. Let's do this together. And then Chris and Rick came to me and said, we want to plant churches. And so I'd been thinking about it a little bit. And I said, let's do this. What if Seacoast Church gave you, and I think the number was $25,000, because I thought it'd take about $50,000 to plant a church. And I said, what if we gave you half of your startup? This is Chris. This is the one I was talking to. What if we gave you $25,000, and then what if we gave you a budget of $150,000 for a year? I thought maybe they could reach 150 people in a year, and it worked out to about $150,000, which would be about $12,500 a month. And what if, as you take offerings with your new church plant, and it doesn't meet 12,500? What if we guarantee that? And you tell us how much, we'll write you a check for the difference for a year, take some of that pressure off, and see if you can really, work on planning a church. And then Rick came to me and said, I heard what you did for Chris. Can you do it for me? We really didn't have the money to do that. Our last church plant had been a major failure and pretty expensive. But I went to our board and I said, hey, I think we ought to do this. So we did both of those on the same weekend. I think it was in 2001 or 2000, maybe it was 2000. And then I told him, I said, let's do this. When I made him a budget, and 10% of that budget was going to go to missions. And I said, when you reach your budget, how about you take the first part of your mission is to pay it forward. Don't pay it back to Seacoast, but let's form a fund that we can do church planning from, and we'll pay it forward. And then when you reach full budget, then you can put some more support in there too, that we'll all put a little bit of support from our churches and see if we can't plant churches. And so we began to do that. And how many ever years later, it's nearly 25, we've planted about almost 1,200 churches. And we're still using that same money over and over and over again, just adding some more to it. And so that's how it started. And that's kind of what the vision was.
1,200 churches is huge. We've had the honor of working with a lot of those church planters over the years. And today you spend a lot of your time working one-on-one with these church planters and pastors with the retreats you guys do at Pastors Collective. Tell me about that.
Pastors Collective was born out of a realization a few years ago that we're doing a good job of planting churches. We really are. I'm proud of how the team does that. But I began to see that there's a mental health crisis. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to see that there's a mental health crisis in America. But I began to see we're having same, if not even exaggerated, issues among pastors for a lot of reasons. And what can we do to help there? And so got together with a couple of friends, and Darren Patrick was one of them, who he and Mark Driscoll started Acts 29 Church Planting Network. I've never seen the church planting networks as competitors. We're all different flavors of doing the same thing. And Darren was a close friend. And so in fact, he came up with the title Pastors Collective. And anyway, COVID happened, and COVID was devastating for pastors. And George Barna has a lot of statistics on that. But to put a face to it, Darren Patrick spoke at Seacoast in May of 2020 on a Sunday and killed himself on Thursday. And it was devastating to me, absolutely devastating. His family, to our church, everybody. And over the process of the next few months, I decided I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to figuring this out. Okay. And so I was president of the ARC. I resigned. I'm on the board, but I resigned as president to full-time invest in what can we do to help leaders live well and finish strong. I believe that in order to build well, you need to be well. You can build big and not be well. We see that all the time. But we need to be well. And I think it's important to learn how to build well. But that's not my lane. My lane is I want to help you be well. Live well, finish strong. And so we started the retreat at Church Creek as a part of Pastors Collective in 2001, hosting groups of pastors, about 15 or 16 at a time, and just really introducing them to a massive injection of rest, relaxation, relationship, and some resources, rest, relationship, resources. And it's been amazing. It's been amazing. Since that time, we have served almost 2,300
Wow.
pastors, leaders. And we do a survey at the end of we do a Monday through Thursday and or another one Thursday through Sunday every week. And we have a survey at the end. One of the questions is that this week has been not very helpful, somewhat helpful, extremely helpful, life-changing. 51% say life-changing.
Wow.
I was there last night. I saw life change happen. Unreal. And then 97% say either extremely helpful or life-changing. Over the last 2 or 3 months, we've had 2 pastors that said it was not just life-changing, it was life-saving. One of them had every plan to take his own life. And so we use, we have a follow-up of 13 weeks or 12 weeks after the retreat. We help them find a band of brothers or band of sisters, and we've got several things that we do, but it's the most rewarding thing I've ever been a part of.
I saw a stat that over 3,000 pastors quit full-time ministry every year, and something like 38% of pastors have seriously considered stepping down from full-time ministry,
Yeah.
like within the past year.
Yep.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, it's a lot of things, and I can have all kinds of ideas. George Barna has done a lot of research on that whole deal, and I know the 38% figure I think comes from one of his research things. We have the same numbers. Ours is a little higher. It's around 42% that of the survey that we do, but
People are more honest with you then.
well, maybe not. We have a bigger group that have done the
Okay.
survey than they did. And when you come to a retreat, not everybody's coming burned out, but probably a larger percentage. So I'll give it that. But it's a lot of things. The top 2 things that Barna stressed in one of his post-COVID research things were the stress of the job, number one. Okay. And I see that. You can say everybody's job's stressful, and it is, but pastors' jobs are more stressful, and there are statistics that prove that. There are higher suicide rates, higher depression rates than general population. Pastors, okay? Pastors will get involved, and there's a lot of reasons for that, a lot of stress. They'll get involved in, 1 minute they are at just heart-wrenching, distressful situations that are helping people walk through. And the next minute they're making a decision on how many widgets do we buy in order to, get this done, or what's the payroll, or, all of it. And it just goes from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's up, down, and you weren't created for that. There are adrenaline issues. And then you carry things that you maybe aren't designed to carry. Jesus said, my load is easy. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. And a lot of us are carrying heavy loads and heavy burdens that maybe Jesus didn't give us, but we're carrying them. And then you've got your personal family stuff and all of that. I mean, all that combined, the stress of the job. And then the second thing, there's a whole long list, but I'll give you 2 that I see all the time. The second one is isolation and loneliness. Okay. So we've got all this stress, and we're isolated and we're lonely, and we don't know what to do with it. And there are a lot of reasons that we're isolated and lonely. We might be isolated and lonely. I hear this. I heard it last night at the retreat. Hear it every time. There's been a relationship severing, and it feels like a betrayal, and someone walks away and they're okay, but you're not.
It's because like someone leaves the church.
Someone leaves the church, a best friend started the church with you and goes and starts one down the block. All kinds of things, just all kinds of things. And pastors aren't immune from being the cause of some of this stuff. It goes both ways, but I hear all the church hurt. Well, there's a lot of church hurt on pastor's side. Okay. And then unmet expectations. in ARC. They see these, these incredible models of, churches that felt like they blew up overnight. And mine's just been sitting here idling for 5 years. I've been there, done that, know what it's like. And so we have these expectations that are crushing us. We have our own personal sin. None of us are perfect, and yet we've got this. If you don't mind, I just this morning on my way over, I saw this recent Barna thing that Glue released, and it talks about the state of the church. But it was interesting. They were measuring Harvard human flourishing. There's a lot out there on that right now. They were measuring that on pastors. And they said a couple of things. They said, number one, pastors aren't getting the help they need. Over 52% of pastors don't get any professional support. Okay. Overall, they said pastors are doing pretty well on the flourishing stuff. They measured a whole bunch of things, 0 to 100. And pastors scored overall 76 out of 100 compared to 71 out of 100 of the general population. So they're doing okay. But two critical areas they aren't doing well at all, and that's relationships and well-being. Relationships were interesting. They said that pastors scored 67% compared to 79% for all the U.S. adult population and 85% for practicing Christians. The people in the church are at this 85% level. General population are at like 79%, and pastors are 67%. Relationships, well-being, same kind of numbers. And so then they conclude their article with those who most need support may least likely access it. They said those that are getting support, pastors that are, they're doing well, but those that need it the most aren't getting it. And that's one of the reasons we started the retreat at Church Creek, and one of the reasons that we make it free for 94% of the churches in America are 500 or less. These are the guys that are working hard, and they are not getting invited to the roundtables. They're not getting, the rest or the whatever. Yeah. They're working hard, and they can't afford what they need. And so we make it free, and I raise money. And here's a commercial. All of my friends have resources. I believe it ought to be in every church budget. Mental health for pastors. Every church. We talk about missions, and we have missions in every budget. You know what? Missions is wonderful, but if the pastor blows up, what does that do to the mission? We need to prioritize the mental health of pastors. I believe that very, very strongly.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. We're in my personal life. Our pastor resigned recently, and that's one of the reasons why I got connected with Jason, and we're partnering with you guys on helping make these retreats happen because I believe in the mission and the vision so much for that. Do you think a lot of like the relational issues that pastors have is because they're taking on everyone else's baggage, they're getting the brunt end of it, but they can't necessarily share their dirty laundry with people in their church?
Exactly.
And so how do pastors have community with, maybe not people in their church, but with that dynamic?
Yeah. I'm not saying you can't be friends with people in the church. Not saying that. I know there was a time that was the general accepted thing, and I don't believe that. But I do believe that every pastor needs to sit at least one table with a group of people who love you, but aren't impressed with you. And trust me, people in your church are impressed with you, and they should be. It's a kind of a different, weird dynamic. Love you, aren't impressed with you, and are willing to tell you the truth. And I believe that so strongly. And so one of the core things, we have 4 meta skills that we think are necessary to be resilient and to keep from burning out. But one of them, the first one, is learn to form a band of brothers or a band of sisters. Okay. Every pastor needs to have a band of brothers. And that's what we do at the retreat. And that's what we teach guys and girls how to do.
Why do you think there's the megachurch pastors or celebrity pastors that are on the Roy's reports, or they have scandals, or they fall? I don't know if it's just social media, but I feel like we're seeing that more and more these days. Why do you think that might be?
Um, I don't know. I got some ideas. I don't have, total data behind them like Barnum might have, but um, we may have an epidemic of that. Okay, I try to doubt it. I wonder if I don't know if there's anybody that knows more mega pastors than I do. Okay, just I'm not puffing me up. I just happen to uh, because of the church plants and the circles that retreat, all of that, and I don't see an epidemic of really horrible people. I don't think I think there are some out there, and I don't want to shoot the messenger, but I kind of like to shoot some of them. I think there are some that their whole mission is to bring down the whole megachurch movement.
Yeah.
That it's evil and it's awful, and they take great delight in airing their own opinions, and very little in finding out what the real truth is.
Because it gets clicks.
Oh, it gets clicks, views, money, all of that. Yeah, it's wonderful. So I think there's what I'm saying is I don't see I see masses of wonderful human beings that are trying to do the best they can. Okay, there are exceptions, and there are some wolves in sheep's clothing, and there are some men and women who some who didn't manage their life properly and burn out. I was with one last night that said 14 years ago, had an affair, tried to blow up his church and his marriage. I've heard this story before. It's not always the case. I heard this story before. He had to get out and didn't know how to get out and made stupid decisions. Is he a wolf? I don't think so. Did he make bad decisions? Absolutely. Did he pay the consequences? Without a doubt. Okay, so you've got that. And you've got predators, and you've got all of those kinds of things. Do we have more than we ever had? That's where I don't know that we do. We're in an immediate, right now, as you and I talk, there's a war going on in Iran and Israel. I could show you a website on here. I can tell you how many missiles were dropped on both sides within the last 20 minutes. We have never lived in an era where information was that immediate. So do we have more than we've ever had before? I don't know. Or do we just have more, the immediate information plus all the other things that you mentioned? Maybe so. But here's what I do know. I'm in the business of helping that not happen. Okay? I want to help pastors live well and finish strong. And that's where I'll leave it. That's what I believe for.
Last question for you. A lot of pastors, it might not be an affair, but they put their church first to where it's almost like the church is the other woman.
Yeah.
And they can sometimes lose their spouse and their families. Yeah. How can church planters and pastors avoid this?
Yeah, I was there. I remember in 1999 pulling into my driveway, and it's Easter Sunday afternoon. I'm exhausted but euphoric. And I turned to my wife and I said, do you realize we just reached, and I said a number of people that we had never seen before. And I think I was saying it in like, it wasn't like guess what, we got this many people. That represents life change. I think I was honest with all of that.
Yeah.
And my wife says to me, well, I'm glad you're excited about that, but that's certainly not my vision. And it wasn't that her vision was not to see people want for the Lord. What she's saying is that we're not on the same page at all. And it took me 2 years probably of hard work to figure that out, and to figure out that she didn't feel cherished. She felt like I had a girlfriend, and it was the church. And I cared a lot more and prioritized the church more than her or the kids or anything else. And, I like to say next year we'll have been married 50 years, and probably 47 good ones. There were some really bad ones during that time of mainly me trying to figure out what does this look like? And I'm glad I did. And I'm not perfect, but I would say it's good to learn from your mistakes. It's better to learn from someone else's. Church planners, learn from mine. Um, Prioritize your wife. Church, people will come, people will go. God loves them. You're not their savior. Okay. Um, Set boundaries of all kinds of good boundaries. Set obviously sexual, physical boundaries. I live by them. Sometimes it's not popular with other people. I really don't care. I've got a good life and I'm going to keep it. And there are things that I do and don't do, and places I go and won't go, and that kind of thing. But also, there needs to be boundaries of, yeah, we're on 24/7 with God, but we're not on 24/7 with people. Um, I have a day off every week. Encourage everybody to, after a certain time. If it's with my family, you have a crisis. Now, if your crisis is somebody died, that type of thing, it's my honor to serve you and to break whatever boundary I've got to break. But if your crisis has been building for like 3 years, we're going to deal with it tomorrow, during work time or whatever, because I don't want your crisis to lead to my crisis. And it's not your fault, it's my fault. And so prioritize your family, prioritize time with God, prioritize rest. Make it you need to rest every day, a rest with God. You need to rest every week, which is a day off. You need to rest at least once a quarter with your spouse. You need to rest once a year with a vacation that involves more than one weekend off. 2 or 3 in a row would be wonderful. You need to rest in a sabbatical about every 5 to 7 years. You need to have rhythms of rest in your life because, again, people used to tell me it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I would say, it's a marathon relay, not a sprint. I'm going to run a marathon and I'm going to hand the baton to someone else. And I want to hand it to them with my family intact and loving God, living well, and finishing strong.
That's so good. I love it so much. For any pastors or church staff out there and they want to get involved with the retreat at Church Creek, what's the best way for them to do that?
PastorsCollective.com. PastorsCollective.com has all the information about how you can sign up to come to a retreat, how you can volunteer at a retreat, how you can give to help others go to a retreat. It's all there, PastorsCollective.com.
Amazing. We will include it down in the description. Pastor Greg, thank you so much for taking time to sow into just our audience, the pastors and church leaders listening, as well as all the things you do for just the Big C Church as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been good to be here. Thank you for what you do.